Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. I first wanted to apologize for not putting out a video last week. I know I said I'd put one out every week. SubhanAllah, right after I put out the first one, I got very sick and lost my voice and have been struggling with that. Being a teacher, I have to use my voice a lot. So every day I start out with a good voice and then begin to lose it by the end of the day. So I waited until I could put out a video where my voice didn't sound so horrible. So inshallah, everyone can hear me and understand me. Secondly, I want to first say thank you to all the support I got after putting out my first video. I did not expect that many people to watch it. I was so thrilled when I saw so many people watching it, so many people liking and commenting. The outcome was a lot better than I could have ever expected. So thank you, Jazakallah khair, to everyone who supported me and continue to want to support me. I really appreciate it. So I guess we'll just jump right into the second video. So as you can see, today's topic is Muslim mental health overview. So before I go into any nitty-gritty details about any specific disorder or anything specific about Muslim incarceration, I figured we can just start with just an overview of Muslim mental health and an overview of the situation of incarcerated Muslims. So this week is a Muslim mental health overview. So the first thing I kind of want to talk about is what is Muslim mental health, right? And before we even debunk that, we have to figure out what is mental health. Now the answer may seem obvious to some. Mental health may be emotional, psychological, and even social well-being. Some people say that if it affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. And then others say, it's mental health is all about disorders and illnesses of the mind. But I definitely want to say that it's so much more than that, right? It's not just about if you have a disorder or a mental illness, it's actually important at every stage of your life. And it's really just about being healthy all around, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Because once one of those kind of becomes unhealthy, then it starts to affect everything else. So the question is how do we attain mental health if nobody is talking about it, right? If nobody is talking about this issue, especially in the Muslim community, how are we supposed to attain it? I wanted to start off with talking about the 6 warning signs of unhealthy mental health, right? This is something that is kind of known, especially if you major in psychology or just maybe common talk. So the first is a long lasting sadness or irritability. Second is extremely high and low moods. The third is excessive fear, worry, and anxiety. The fourth is social withdrawal. The fifth is dramatic changes in eating or sleeping habits. And the sixth is trouble understanding to or relating to situations and people. So, my favorite one is actually the last one, the trouble understanding to or relating to situations and people because again, how can you relate to someone or have an understanding with someone if it's not being talked about even with your closest friends, right? Because your closest friends may be Muslim, your closest family members may be Muslim, but if they still have this idea that mental health is this big taboo and they don't want to talk about it or address it, how can you possibly feel close to someone or how can you possibly feel like someone is understanding you? But really, all of these 6 symptoms can be addressed if we start the conversation, right? They kind of all, and I'm not minimizing any of these. I'm not saying that none of these exist. Of course, every single one of them exists. But the fact that we don't talk about it just makes it worse. And it actually might be that someone has a small glimmer of one of these symptoms, but the fact that they feel like they have nobody to talk to, nobody to entrust in, makes it a lot more. And maybe it's a lot more in their mind because if you don't talk about something, it kind of just lingers in your mind and it's weighs heavier. Or maybe it actually makes them, for example, more sad or more irritable or have more fear and worry, anxiety. The fact that they can't go to anyone to talk about it, to entrust that that person won't judge them, maybe causes all of these to be even more of an issue. So, again, all of these could be addressed if we start the conversation. So now might some people might be wondering, okay, what conversation? We all know what anxiety is, we all know what depression is. Well, first of all, it's not only about knowing what it is, it's about normalizing it, right? It's about telling someone, oh, you have anxiety or oh, you have depression. That's not abnormal. You're not abnormal. Everyone goes through this, maybe some more than others, but even if you are that one that goes through it more times than maybe other people, that's still not abnormal. That doesn't mean that you're different or you're bad in any way. Also, a big thing is the fact that Islam has a cure to every single one of these unhealthy warning signs, right? Islam talks about everything so beautifully and so perfectly that if you are experiencing any of these, all you have to do is turn to Islam to find the cure. You don't need to turn to another human or medication or anything. Maybe after a while, turning to people and turning to certain medications for certain things may be necessary, but your first step should always be turning to Islam because, again, Allah provides us with the cure to every illness that we can face. So, we have two things. So, this week I want to focus on normalizing the conversation. And then next week I want to focus on talking about Islam's cures to all these symptoms. So the first thing about normalizing this conversation of Muslim mental health is debunking certain definitions of mental health. There's a lot of definitions out there. Some of them are great and some of them are not so great. So mental health is not the absence of a mental disorder. That would mean that someone with a mental disorder could never attain mental health, and that's just absolutely wrong. If you have a mental disorder, you can absolutely attain mental health if you deal with it in the right way, you get the right help, and you deal with it how you feel best to deal with it, whether that's with therapy, medication, however you feel is best suited to your individual disorder. Also, mental health is not measured on the ability to enjoy life. That's a very unhealthy way of looking at things because basically that means that as soon as you stop enjoying life, then you have unhealthy mental health, which is horrible because we all stop enjoying life from time to time, right? Some days are better than others, some days are just horrible, maybe, and that's again okay. We're humans, it's gonna be like that. Even Allah says that our connection to him is gonna it's a roller coaster, it's gonna go up and down, so our moods are gonna go up and down. And just because one day you may be feeling like, oh, I want to stay in bed all day and be lazy and not deal with the world, doesn't mean you have unhealthy mental health. Also, if you put these two definitions together, the fact that if you have a mental disorder, you are not mentally healthy, and if you don't enjoy life, then you are not mentally healthy. Then, if you have a mental disorder, you can never enjoy life, which is absolutely not true. So, these two definitions already just show a lot of flaws in them, and they're not correct, and they just make people feel worse about themselves if they are having a mental health issue or if they're maybe thinking they're having a mental health issue and are in denial. So, the better definition would be the state of well being in which a person realizes his or her abilities, copes with normal stresses of life, works productively, and is able to make a contribution to the community. I love that definition because I really feel like no matter who you are, it can be applied to you. No matter if you have a mental disorder or not, no matter how severe your mental disorder is, everyone can realize his or her abilities, can cope with normal stresses of life, they can work productively, and they are able to make a contribution to the community. In what capacity it might differ, but even with people with no mental disorders, it's going to differ. So it's really up to that person to decide what they think contributing to the community would look like, or what they think working productively might look like. Again, depending on the severity of your mental disorder, it'll look different, but you still have that right to achieve mental health. So, next comes facts. Again, in trying to normalize the conversation of mental health. So, statistics say that almost 1 in 5 Americans, that's 19% to be exact, experience mental health problems each year. 9.8 million adults have a serious mental disorder. The most common are anxiety, including panic, phobia, OCD, and PTSD, mood, including depression and bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. So, those are the three most common disorders. So, two things we can do to normalize this information. The first thing is we can say that's a lot of people, right? If 19% of Americans experience mental health problems and 9.8 million adults have it, you're not alone, obviously. That's quite a lot of people. And as much as we're trying to lower that rate, we also want to say, hey, look, there are other people experiencing it. You're not alone. You're not abnormal. Maybe even try to go find those people or realize that it's not something against you or something weird. A lot of other people are experiencing it. The second thing we can do is we can realize that sometimes just because you are having a bad day, it doesn't mean you are having mental health problems. Or just because, for example, you can't sit still in class, you're a child and go to school and you can't sit still, doesn't mean that you have a mental disorder, right? There are people who have mental disorders that need to be addressed and talked about, again, like with therapy or, with even treated with medication. But the problem with society is they want to just prescribe a mental disorder to everyone. So just because you may be experiencing a symptom from time to time, or maybe even experiencing full blown symptoms, like I said, with a child, who can't sit still, doesn't mean that we automatically write them off as having a disorder and just prescribe to them what they need. Sometimes, again, society likes to put labels on people when maybe that child just has a big creative imagination, or maybe you are just having a bad day. That doesn't necessarily mean you have a mental disorder. Again, there are people who struggle with this, and that is a very real struggle. But society also tells us that basically, if anything is wrong with you, that's considered a mental disorder, and that's very incorrect. We're all humans, we're going to experience different emotions, and it's just realizing how to deal with those emotions. So basically, stop making everyone think that there's something wrong with them, right? Because society has a very good way of doing that. So now we turn to Muslim mental health. So basically the same thing, right? Muslims face mental health problems as well. We're people too, right? We face it. We need to talk about it. We're not any different from anyone else who needs to talk about it. We're not any different from anyone else who needs, certain medication. Whether that's, again, when I say medication, I don't necessarily mean pills, because I look at therapy as medication too. So we may just look at them differently because of our awareness of the right path. We may look at a certain disorder differently than a certain westernized person or American person or society looks at it, but that doesn't mean that we don't experience it, and that doesn't mean that we don't need to address it. So, the last thing is we also might experience different mental health issues, including being stigmatized for our religion in this society, right? So, racism is big, especially in certain parts of the country, and phobias and things like that that come with racism may be more prevalent in our culture and in our religion than others. So again, Muslim mental health is basically just mental health, but dealing with it in an Islamic way. So that is it for today's video. And again, next week we'll be talking about those 6 symptoms and how they relate to Islam and what Islam says about their cure. So inshallah, you enjoyed today's video. Please like and comment and subscribe. If anyone has any questions, or even comments if they disagree or agree or have certain questions about things, please, I'm open to that and I would love to discuss further. But yes, for now, that's it. Assalamu alaikum.